The war on drugs began in June 1971. The President, Richard Nixon, declared drug abuse to be public enemy number one. He increased funding for drug control agencies and drug treatment agencies. Although this sounds positive, it was very racially motivated. Jim Crow laws intended to treat and legally view people of color as less than, ran rampant in the 1960s. After they ended in 1965, something had to take its place. In Black and brown communities, there was a rise in the usage and distribution of street drugs, primarily crack. The reason for this increase has been speculated, but it can be primarily attributed to the lack of income in these communities. The Safe Streets Act of 1968 was a $400 million investment that primarily went to surveillance in low-income urban neighborhoods. The Drug Enforcement Administration of 1973, also known as the DEA, was a task force specifically focused on drug use and smuggling. Nixon also classified marijuana as a Schedule I drug, the most restrictive classification. Although tensions surrounding drug usage and the law did lighten up during Jimmy Carter's presidency, this did not last very long. When Ronald Reagan took his place, harsh drug policies began to start back up again.
And we speak to you not simply as fellow citizens, but as fellow parents and grandparents and as concerned neighbors. It's back to school time for America's children, and while drug and alcohol abuse cuts across all generations, it's especially damaging to the young people on whom our future depends. So tonight, from our family to yours, from our home to yours, thank you for joining us. America has accomplished so much in these last few years, whether it's been rebuilding our economy or serving the cause of freedom in the world. What we've been able to achieve has been done with your help, with us working together as a nation united. Now, we need your support again. Drugs are menacing our society. Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children. From the beginning of our administration, we've taken strong steps to do something about this horror. Tonight, I can report to you that we've made much progress. 37 federal agencies are working together in a vigorous national effort. And by next year, our spending for drug law enforcement will have more than tripled from its 1981 levels. We have increased seizures of illegal drugs. Shortages of marijuana are now being reported. Last year alone, over 10,000 drug criminals were convicted, and nearly $250 million of their assets were seized by the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. And in the most important area, individual use, we see progress. In 4 years, the number of high school seniors using marijuana on a daily basis has dropped from 1 in 14 to 1 in 20. The U.S. military has cut the use of illegal drugs among its personnel by 67% since 1980. These are a measure of our commitment and emerging signs that we can defeat this enemy. But we still have much to do. Despite our best efforts, illegal cocaine is coming into our country at alarming levels, and 4 to 5 million people regularly use it. 500,000 Americans are hooked on heroin. 1 in 12 persons smokes marijuana regularly. Regular drug use is even higher among the age group 18 to 25, most likely just entering the workforce. Today, there's a new epidemic, smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an explosively destructive and often lethal substance which is crushing its users. It is an uncontrolled fire. And drug abuse is not a so-called victimless crime. Everyone's safety is at stake when drugs and excessive alcohol are used by people on the highways or by those transporting our citizens or operating industrial equipment. Drug abuse costs you and your fellow Americans at least $60 billion a year.
The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 severely affected Black and brown communities. It created longer sentences for crack cocaine, which was typically used by people of color, than powder cocaine. This led to mass incarceration.
In the 1960s, the prison population in the United States was around 200,000, but by the early 2000s, that number had exploded to over 1.5 million people in prison, with hundreds of thousands in other penal facilities. Think youth facilities, jails, and immigrant detention centers. And much of that increase can be attributed to Reagan-era war on drugs policies, although the war on drugs was first popularized by the Nixon administration in the 1970s. Popular wisdom connects these policies to the rise of crack cocaine across the US. However, according to Alexander, the official political campaign in 1982, known as the War on Drugs, actually predates the rise of crack cocaine addiction it was commonly assumed to address. She writes, "A few years after the drug war was declared, crack began to spread rapidly in the poor Black neighborhoods of Los Angeles and later emerged in cities across the country. The Reagan administration hired staff to publicize the emergence of crack cocaine in 1985 as part of a strategic effort to build public and legislative support for the war."
Today, public attitudes towards drugs have changed drastically. Marijuana in particular is now seen as a drug that can be used medicinally as well as recreationally. In Chapter 9, we discussed how public opinion can be shaped or influenced by law. In the context of the war on drugs, there is evidence of legal repression. Legal repression is the act of using the law against social movements. In this context, it would be the civil rights movement, or any movement geared at the progression of minorities within America. As mentioned before, Jim Crow laws were in place prior to the war on drugs. They were used to repress minorities within America and legally discriminate against them. When they ended, the war on drugs arose as a placeholder for Jim Crow laws. Legally, the government could no longer discriminate against minorities, so they over-policed them and put them in prisons instead. Through means of legal repression and manipulation, the law can be used to shift public opinion and achieve personal agendas. This was exemplified through the mass incarceration of minorities, particularly African Americans, and disguised under the title of the war on drugs.